Application of demand and supply equation in tax policy. Tax policy, a cornerstone of government fiscal strategy, significantly impacts economic activity. Understanding how taxes influence markets requires a firm grasp of the fundamental principles of demand and supply. The application of the demand and supply equation in tax policy provides a powerful framework for analyzing these effects, predicting outcomes, and ultimately, designing more effective and efficient tax systems. This study guide explores how these equations are applied, providing examples and linking to scholarly sources for further learning. Understanding demand and supply. Before diving into the specifics of tax policy, let's briefly review the core concepts of demand and supply. Demand. Demand represents the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices during a specific period. The law of demand states that, generally, as the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases, and vice versa. This inverse relationship is typically represented by a downward-sloping demand curve. The demand equation can be represented as QD equals A, BP, where QD equals quantity demanded, A equals autonomous demand, B equals sensitivity of quantity demanded to price change, P equals price. Supply. Supply represents the quantity of a good or service that producers are willing and able to offer for sale at various prices during a specific period. The law of supply states that, generally, as the price of a good increases, the quantity supplied increases, and vice versa. This direct relationship is typically represented by an upward-sloping supply curve. The supply equation can be represented as QS equals C plus DP, where QS equals quantity supplied, C equals autonomous supply, D equals sensitivity of quantity supplied to price change, P equals price. Equilibrium. The point where the demand and supply curves intersect represents the market equilibrium. At this point, the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, and the market clears. This equilibrium is crucial for understanding the baseline scenario before the introduction of any tax policy. The impact of taxes on demand and supply. Taxes can be levied on either consumers or producers. Regardless of who is legally responsible for paying the tax, the economic incidence is determined by the relative elasticities of demand and supply. Taxes on consumers. When a tax is imposed on consumers, it effectively shifts the demand curve downward by the amount of the tax. Consumers are now willing to pay less for the good or service because they have to pay the tax on top of the price. The new demand equation becomes QD equals A, BP plus tax. This leads to a lower equilibrium price and quantity. Taxes on producers. When a tax is imposed on producers, it effectively shifts the supply curve upward by the amount of the tax. Producers require a higher price to supply the same quantity because they have to pay the tax. The new supply equation becomes QS equals C plus DP, tax. This also leads to a higher equilibrium price and a lower equilibrium quantity. The application of the demand and supply equation in tax policy helps visualize and quantify these shifts, allowing policymakers to estimate the resulting changes in price and quantity. Using the demand and supply equation to analyze tax incidence. Tax incidence refers to the distribution of the tax burden between consumers and producers. The relative elasticities of demand and supply are the key determinants of tax incidence. Elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price. A more elastic demand means consumers are more sensitive to price changes. Elasticity of supply measures the responsiveness of quantity supplied to a change in price. A more elastic supply means producers are more sensitive to price changes. General rules. In elastic demand, elastic supply, consumers bear a larger share of the tax burden. Because demand is inelastic, consumers are less likely to reduce their consumption significantly in response to a price increase caused by the tax. Elastic demand. In elastic supply, producers bear a larger share of the tax burden. Because supply is inelastic, producers cannot easily reduce their output in response to a price decrease and therefore must absorb more of the tax. Example: let's consider a hypothetical market for cigarettes. Suppose the initial demand and supply equations are QD equals 100-2P, QS equals 10 plus P. Equating QD and QS, we find the equilibrium price, P equals 30, and the equilibrium quantity, Q equals 40. Now, suppose the government imposes a tax of $10 per pack on cigarettes. We'll assume the tax is levied on producers. The new supply equation becomes QS equals 10 plus P minus 10. QS equals 20 plus P. Equating the new QS with the original QD, 100 minus 2P equals 20 plus P. 80 equals 3P. P equals 26.67. The new equilibrium quantity can be found by substituting the new price into either the demand or supply equation. Using the demand equation, QD equals 100 minus 2 equals 36.66. Therefore, the new equilibrium price is $26.67, and the new equilibrium quantity is approximately 36.66. Analysis: the price paid by consumers has decreased from $30 to $26.67. The price received by producers is $26.67 minus $10 equals $16.67. Consumers bear a portion of the tax burden equal to $30 minus $26.67 equals $3.33 per unit. Producers bear a portion of the tax burden equal to $30 minus $16.67 equals $13.33 per unit. In this example, producers bear a larger share of the tax burden, suggesting that the supply of cigarettes is relatively more inelastic than the demand. Beyond simple equations, considerations and limitations. While the basic demand and supply equations provide a valuable framework, the application of demand and supply equation in tax policy often requires more sophisticated models to account for real-world complexities. These complexities include multiple markets. Taxes in one market can affect other related markets. Time lags. The full impact of a tax policy may not be immediately apparent due to adjustment lags in consumer and producer behavior. Behavioral responses. Taxes can influence behavior in ways not captured by simple demand and supply models. Progressive, regressive, and proportional taxes. The demand and supply model can be used to analyze the impact of different types of taxes on different income groups. Scholarly sources and further reading. For a deeper understanding of the application of demand and supply equation in tax policy, consider exploring the following resources: Mankiw, N.G. Principles of Economics. Cengage Learning. Gruber, J. Public Finance and Public Policy. Worth Publishers. Auerbach, A.J., and Feldstein, M. Handbook of Public Economics. Elsevier. Congressional Budget Office Publications. CBO regularly publishes reports analyzing the economic effects of tax policies. In conclusion, the application of the demand and supply equation in tax policy is a fundamental tool for economists and policymakers. By understanding how taxes shift demand and supply curves and how elasticities influence tax incidence, we can better predict the economic consequences of tax policies and design more effective and equitable tax systems. While simple models have limitations, they provide a crucial starting point for analyzing the complex interactions between taxes and markets. Further research and more sophisticated models are essential for addressing the nuances of real-world tax policy challenges.